Sarah had always believed in the goodness of people. Even when life tried to prove her wrong, she was the kind of person who gave her heart freely, trusting that others would do the same. She had always been surrounded by friends and family who admired her warmth, generosity, and the way she always put others first. But there was one person she trusted more than anyone else: Daniel. He wasn't just a friend, he was her confidant, the person who understood her deepest fears, her unspoken desires, and the silent battles she fought within herself. Daniel had been there for her in ways no one else had, through every heartbreak, every moment of doubt. They had shared memories that ran deeper than words, moments of laughter that had helped them both survive their personal storms. Sarah had never imagined that anyone so close to her could betray her trust, and yet, Daniel had become the most important person in her life. She'd opened her heart to him without hesitation, confident that their bond was unbreakable. For Sarah, trusting Daniel was second nature. She had never questioned his loyalty or the sincerity of his feelings toward her. Their bond felt like a promise that no matter what happened, they would always have each other's backs. She had been blind to the small, sometimes subtle cracks in their relationship, the moments when Daniel's words didn't match his actions. But she had been so deeply immersed in their connection that those warning signs faded into the background. Sarah's relationship with Daniel felt like a dream where everything seemed perfect and flawless. She always believed that true love had no deceit or trickery. For Sarah, love meant complete loyalty, absolute honesty, and sharing each other's dreams and fears without any fear. When Daniel told her that he would always be there for her, Sarah wholeheartedly accepted those promises. She never imagined those promises were just words that could break one day. Every time they were together, Sarah felt like she was the most important part of his life. She believed without doubt that he would always be there for her, no matter what the circumstances were. In her mind, there was no doubt that they would always be together, facing every challenge, never leaving each other alone. Sarah also believed that her relationship with Daniel was the truest one, and there could be no greater bond than theirs. She knew that every relationship faces difficulties, but she always thought that if love was real, it would overcome every obstacle. She dreamed of a future with Daniel, where they would conquer the world together. Little did she know that her love would one day shatter, and everything she knew would be far from reality. Over time, Sarah began to notice small, almost unnoticeable changes in Daniel's behavior. At first, she brushed them off, convincing herself that it was nothing more than temporary stress or misunderstandings. However, the signs started to grow harder to ignore. Daniel's words no longer felt as warm and comforting as before. His promises of always being there for her began to feel distant, as if they were spoken without the depth they once carried. Sarah found herself waiting longer for Daniel to respond to her messages or calls, and when he did, his replies felt rushed and shallow. There were times when she would talk about something important to her, and Daniel's eyes would glaze over, his attention wandering as if he wasn't really present. The little things that used to mean so much, like sharing inside jokes or comforting her after a tough day, were starting to fade away. At times, Daniel would make plans with Sarah only to cancel at the last moment, leaving her confused and hurt. His excuses were always vague, and though he promised to make it up to her, nothing ever seemed to change. The closeness they once had seemed to be slipping through her fingers, and Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was no longer his priority. Despite the occasional sweet gestures, the deep connection they once shared felt increasingly forced. She began questioning her own judgment, wondering if she had been too trusting, too eager to believe in the promises that were slowly unraveling before her eyes. The cracks were starting to show, and Sarah couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease in her heart. They were small signs, ones that anyone could easily overlook, and Sarah did the same. When Daniel first dismissed her dreams as childish, she smiled and said, "Maybe he's just tired." When he stayed busy for days, and didn't return her calls, she reassured herself, maybe he had a rough day. Every time he was absent, every time he seemed cold, she hid those feelings behind excuses. When he avoided eye contact during conversations, when he stayed silent, or made sarcastic remarks about her feelings, she paused for a moment inside, but quickly convinced herself, it doesn't mean he doesn't care. These were the moments Sarah kept ignoring, because she wanted to remember the good things, the times Daniel made her coffee, wrapped her in a blanket on cold nights, held her close to his chest. She wanted to believe those moments were real, and everything else was just a misunderstanding. But every little thing left a mark. The questions she kept burying began to echo louder in her heart. A smile that felt forced, a sentence left incomplete, a glance that didn't carry love like before. And Sarah, she still didn't want to see the truth, because her heart was still holding on to the illusion, and calling it love. One evening, everything changed. The illusion she held on to so tightly shattered. In a single moment, Sarah wasn't looking for proof. She wasn't even suspicious anymore. She had convinced herself everything was fine, but the universe had its own way of revealing truth. She borrowed Daniel's laptop, just to check her email, a simple act with no hidden intention. But as soon as she opened the browser, an unfamiliar name popped up in the message notifications. Curiosity pulled her in. Before she knew it, she had uncovered a string of messages, sweet words exchanged, playful promises made, and plans discussed, all with someone else. Her heart stopped for a moment. Every line she read felt like a stab. Every emoji, a silent slap. Each word was a mirror, reflecting everything she had refused to see for months. All her doubts were now screaming in her face. Sarah sat frozen, her fingers trembling, her breath uneven. The betrayal was undeniable, not just in action, but in the ease with which Daniel had lied to her face, smiled at her, hugged her while building another world behind her back. When he returned, she didn't scream, she didn't cry, she just looked at him, and said a single word, "Why?" And in that moment, everything between them stood still. No excuse, no explanation could erase what had been revealed. That night, Sarah didn't just lose her trust, she lost a part of herself, the part that believed love was always true, that promises were sacred, that someone's words could be trusted. And that moment became the turning point, the line that divided before and after, because once truth enters, even the strongest illusion, it crumbles. No matter how deeply you loved the lie, the moment reality truly hits is not always loud. Sometimes it arrives in complete silence, like a cold wind sneaking in through a crack in the window. The protagonist sits there surrounded by the same room that once felt like home, yet now every corner echoes with betrayal. Every memory feels like a lie painted over truth. They stare at the floor, their breathing shallow heart pounding 1,000 beats a minute, trying to process how everything they trusted, every word believed, every moment cherished was nothing but a carefully woven illusion. They replay conversations in their mind, searching for the truth, hidden between the lines, but the weight of realization settles like a stone in their chest. The person they believed in, the one they gave their heart to, was never really who they claimed to be. That truth is unbearable, because it doesn't just shatter their view of the other person, it shatters their own sense of judgment, their own identity. How could they not have seen it? Why did they ignore the signs, doubt their own instincts? It's not just heartbreak, it's the pain of self-betrayal, the sense that somewhere deep down they knew, but they didn't want to face it. They chose love over logic, and now love has abandoned them. They cry, not just for the loss of the relationship, but for the loss of the version of themselves that believed in it so deeply. It's a heavy ache, not easily soothed. Their world now feels unfamiliar, distorted. The walls that once offered safety now trap them in pain, and in that silence, surrounded by shattered trust and broken illusions, they realize the hardest truth of all. Sometimes the person you trusted most is the one who teaches you what betrayal truly feels like, and there's no going back from that moment. The emotional aftermath of betrayal is an overwhelming storm that floods every thought and feeling. It touches, the shock hits first, like a cold wave that freezes everything within you. Your mind races, but no thought can seem to stick. Nothing feels real in the moment, as if your world has been warped beyond recognition. You can't grasp how it happened, how someone you trusted with your heart could so casually break it apart. Anger follows quickly. It's like a fire igniting from deep within your chest. Every part of you wants to lash out, scream at the injustice of it all. The betrayal stings deeper than anything else, because it's not just about broken promises, it's about the violation of trust, a sacred thing you thought was unbreakable. Disbelief is the next stage. Your mind refuses to accept the truth. The signs were always there, but you ignored them, because you wanted to believe, you wanted to trust, you wanted to hold on to the person they promised to be. But now that mask has fallen, and all that remains is the harsh reality of who they truly are. You question every moment, every word and every action, wondering how you could have missed the signs. The feeling of being deceived sinks in like a weight in your stomach, a knot that refuses to loosen. It's not just about the betrayal itself, but about the false hope that you built on lies, the belief that they were your safe place, and now you're left with nothing but the jagged pieces of that illusion. No matter how hard you try to piece them together, they don't fit anymore, and that realization hurts more than anything else. The person you trusted has now become a symbol of everything that has shattered within you, leaving a hole where trust once resided. The protagonist's mind starts to spiral as they replay every moment, every word, and every action that led up to the betrayal. Doubt creeps in, and they begin to question everything they once believed in. Were the signs always there, hidden in plain sight, or were they too blind to see them? Did they ignore the small cracks in the foundation of the relationship, thinking that love and trust were enough to hold everything together? The self-blame starts to take root, and they wonder if their unwavering trust was the real problem. Perhaps they were too quick to believe in the promises made, too eager to see the good in the other person, despite the subtle hints that something was off. Were they too trusting, too willing to give their heart without asking questions? The feeling of self-doubt begins to weigh heavily, and it's hard to silence the voices in their head, asking why they didn't see it coming. Every action now seems like a clue they missed, every word a potential warning sign they failed to recognize. Could they have done something differently, seen something that would have saved them from this heartbreak? They start to lose trust in their own instincts, wondering if they've been naive or foolish. The emotional turmoil intensifies as they realize that they may have been deceived not just by the other person, but by their own judgment as well. The question remains, did they miss the signs, or were they just too trusting to notice? The betrayal wasn't just a random act, it was rooted in deeper, more personal issues that the betrayer never shared or addressed. Beneath the surface of charm and affection, there lay insecurities that had always festered but were never exposed. The betrayer perhaps struggled with feelings of inadequacy, constantly comparing themselves to others, and fearing that they weren't enough. The promises made weren't broken because of a lack of love, but because of the fear of vulnerability and exposure. They didn't feel worthy of the trust placed in them, so instead of confronting their own shortcomings, they chose to deceive, to maintain an illusion of perfection that they thought was necessary for acceptance. There could also have been selfish motives, desires for power, attention, or validation. The betrayer might have craved admiration or validation from others outside of the relationship, using deceit as a means to feel more secure, more in control. They didn't consider the emotional cost their actions would have on the person who trusted them. The need for constant affirmation might have clouded their judgment, making them blind to the damage they were causing. In some cases, unresolved past traumas or experiences might have played a role. The betrayer might have never learned how to build healthy, trusting relationships, or they might have been carrying emotional baggage that distorted their ability to genuinely connect with others. Deep-seated fears, abandonment issues, or even past betrayals might have driven them to act out in self-destructive ways, hurting the one person who trusted them most. The betrayal wasn't just a choice, it was a culmination of fears, insecurities, and unhealed wounds that influenced their actions. The moment of confrontation arrives unexpectedly, when emotions are raw and words are sharp. The protagonist, still reeling from the betrayal, confronts the betrayer, hoping for some form of clarity, something to explain the unexplainable. The air is thick with tension as questions hang in the balance. Why? What was the real reason behind this? How could someone they trusted so deeply betray them in such a profound way? The betrayer, caught off guard by the confrontation, struggles to form words. There's hesitation, a long pause, as if searching for the right explanation, the one that might soothe the pain, but nothing seems right. Finally, the truth begins to spill out. The betrayer speaks of feelings of inadequacy, of the constant pressure to meet expectations, both from themselves and others. They confess to a deep-rooted insecurity, one that has been festering for years, but was hidden behind a mask of affection and promises. They admit to being afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of showing weakness, which led them to make choices that were selfish and ultimately hurtful. The promises that were made were never meant to be broken, but they had never truly believed they were worthy of the trust placed in them. They speak of their fear of abandonment, of never being good enough, and how, in a moment of weakness, they made a decision that would ultimately shatter the very thing they cherished. The protagonist listens, their heart a mixture of anger and sorrow. They now understand that the betrayal was not just an act of cruelty, but the result of internal battles, of unresolved issues that had never been dealt with. Yet, understanding doesn't make the pain any less real. After the confrontation, when everything lays bare, and emotions are raw, protagonist finds themselves standing at a crossroads, a part of them still trapped in the ruins of broken trust, and the other yearning to move forward. The healing doesn't begin with a dramatic act. It starts quietly within the silence of sleepless nights, and in the solitude where they finally begin to sit with their pain. Instead of running from it, they reflect on who they were before the betrayal, and slowly begin to reclaim the pieces of their identity that were buried under someone else's lies. They begin to notice their thoughts more clearly, recognizing which ones were planted by manipulation, and which belonged to their true self. At first they second-guess everything from their emotions to their decisions, but gradually confidence begins to return, through small steps, standing up for themselves, saying no without guilt, and allowing themselves to feel joy again. They seek comfort in honest connections, maybe through friends, family, or even a therapist, who helps them untangle the emotional knots left behind. Rebuilding trust is the hardest part, especially in themselves, but every time they choose self-respect over doubt, they take back a little of their power. They learn that healing isn't about forgetting or pretending the pain didn't happen, but about learning to live beyond it, stronger and wiser than before. It's a slow journey, full of relapses and revelations, but through it all, the protagonist realizes that they are no longer defined by the betrayal, but by how they choose to rise from it. Every scar becomes a reminder, not of the hurt, but of the strength it took to survive and keep going. And that is where true healing begins, in choosing themselves again and again, no matter how broken they once felt. The pain of betrayal is like an unexpected storm that can tear apart the foundation of trust, leaving everything in ruins. However, as time passes, the protagonist begins to realize that this storm, while powerful, is not the end of their journey. The emotional scars may never completely fade, but they begin to understand that their past does not have to dictate their future. The key lesson here is that betrayal, as devastating as it is, doesn't define them. Instead, what truly matters is how they rise from it, how they rebuild, and how they learn to trust again. Through this painful experience, the protagonist gains a deeper understanding of themselves. They learn about their own resilience, their ability to heal, and the importance of setting healthy boundaries. The betrayal becomes an opportunity for growth, a way to discover their own strength and their capacity for self-love and forgiveness. They realize that trusting again is not about forgetting the past, but about choosing not to let it hold them back. This experience teaches them to value the relationships that nurture and support them, to recognize toxic patterns early on, and to prioritize their own well-being. They understand that they deserve to be surrounded by people who honor their trust and respect their boundaries. The betrayal, though painful, becomes a lesson in resilience and self-worth, helping them develop a stronger, wiser sense of who they are and what they deserve from the relationships in their life. Ultimately, the protagonist learns that their future is not dictated by the actions of others, but by the choices they make moving forward. After the crushing betrayal, the protagonist begins to emerge from the emotional wreckage, like a phoenix rising from the ashes. Though the scars of the past remain, the individual no longer allows them to define their worth or future. The betrayal, once a source of pain and self-doubt, now becomes a catalyst for growth. With time and self-reflection, the protagonist learns to embrace their inner strength, realizing that they are not a victim of their circumstances, but a survivor of them. This shift in perspective is not immediate, but gradual. The process of healing requires facing the painful emotions head-on, accepting the reality of the betrayal, and allowing oneself to grieve. But through this journey, the protagonist gains a newfound sense of resilience and self-awareness. Their ability to trust again does not come easily, but with each step they learn to set healthier boundaries and develop a stronger sense of self-worth. The protagonist begins to recognize their own value independent of others' actions or approval. They understand true strength lies in their ability to rise after being knocked down, and in their capacity to forgive themselves for not seeing the signs earlier. The betrayal no longer holds power over them. Instead, it becomes a lesson, one that teaches them the importance of trust, self-respect, and the strength to walk away from anything or anyone that threatens their peace. They emerge stronger, more confident, and ready to embrace a future that is not dictated by the past, but shaped by their own choices. The story concludes with the protagonist standing at the edge of a new chapter, ready to embrace a future that is no longer defined by the betrayal they endured. The lessons learned from the pain and heartache become the foundation of their new strength. They take a deep breath, not as someone broken, but as someone who has been forged in the fire of hardship. The weight of the past no longer holds them down. Instead, it serves as a reminder of how far they've come. They begin to see the world with fresh eyes, realizing that their worth was never tied to someone else's actions or approval. The pain of the betrayal, once all-consuming, starts to fade as they focus on rebuilding themselves, nurturing their confidence, and setting healthier boundaries. They've learned to trust their instincts again, not out of fear, but out of strength. With each small step, they begin to embrace the possibilities ahead. No longer will they allow the scars of their past to dictate their future. The protagonist knows that the road ahead may not be without challenges, but they're no longer afraid of what may come. With resilience as their guide, they step into the unknown, ready to create a future that is shaped by their own choices, their own power, and their own worth. The story ends not in defeat, but in hope, as they move forward, stronger and wiser, ready for a new beginning.